everybody, I just wanted to make one more video really clarifying the process of figuring out how many beats we're allowed to have per measure. Now, hopefully you remember from our last video that the top number tells us how many of those notes we have, and the bottom number tells us what kind of notes that we're using, and we can use this chart that I put up above here to help you remember. Okay, so for clarification, first thing you want to do when you're doing this is you're going to find out what kind of notes we're using. Okay, then all you have to do is look at the top number to tell us how many of those notes we're going to have per measure. Now remember, when we decide how many notes we're going to have per measure, that does not mean that we are limited to only using those kind of notes. This just gives us our guideline, okay? So let's do an example. Let's do 4/4. This is a very common one. Now, 4/4, if we use our little chart and our little example down here below the chart that explains the top number and the bottom number, we can figure this out, okay? So first of all, we're going to look at that bottom number. Now, look over here on the left. The bottom number tells us what kind of notes we're using, okay? So we go to our chart and we see that a quarter note, that a 4 on the bottom tells us that we're looking at quarter notes. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do quarter note on the bottom, okay? And then you can see on the left, the top number tells us how many of those notes we have, okay? So I'm just going to copy that over there. That means we can have 4 quarter notes per measure. So let's draw a little example measure here, okay? We can have 4 quarter notes per measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we have to figure out how many beats that is. What is the note value of a quarter note? Remember that this chart on the left is not the note value. This is this is telling us the answers to the bottom numbers of time signatures or meter, okay? Our note value of a quarter note is 1 beat, okay? So I'm going to put 1 underneath all of this. Now, if you add all of that up, that means that our number of beats that we have to have per measure is 4, okay? So let's say we have an example, and I'm going to make some measures, and we have to fill them out, okay? So let's say we have a whole note. Well, how many beats is a whole note? A whole note is worth 4 beats. Does this 4 equal this 4? It does, so that can be a measure. Now, what if I put a half note and a half note? How many beats is a half note worth? 2 and 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. So, again, that works. Okay? So we'll put a measure there. Now, what if I did a quarter rest and a half note? Okay? A quarter rest is worth 1 beat, and a half note is worth 2 beats, and that equals 3. Now, that is less than 4, right? So that does not work, okay? So we need to go and add something else to it. So how many beats do we need to add? Well, 3 plus 1 is 4. So we need to add 1 more beat to this, okay? What if we could add another quarter rest. We could add a quarter note. We could add eighth notes. We could add 2 eighth rests, okay? As long as it's equal to 4 once we add it all up. So at 2 eighth notes, 1 is worth half a beat, another is worth half a beat. 2 plus 1 is 3, plus half is 2.5, plus half is 3.5, plus half is 4. 4 is equal to 4, so this works. What if I did a half note plus a half note plus us a quarter rest. Okay, a half note is 2. Another half note is 2. A quarter rest is 1. 2 plus 2 is 4. Plus 1 is 5. Is 5 equal to the 4 that we're looking for? No, it is not. So we need to take something away, and we're going to take away that quarter note, or that quarter rest. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Is 4 equal to 4? Yes. So that would work. Okay? The main thing I want you to be able to figure out is just this part up here. Let me erase all this and I'll show you. The main thing that I really, really, really need you to figure out is this part right here. Okay? This process. Figuring out, first of all, what that bottom number is talking about. Using that chart over on the left to figure out what that bottom note is talking about. Then figuring out that whatever number and note that gives you, that's how many notes per measure we're using as a guide. Okay? Then you're going to figure out the note value of all of those notes and figure out how many beats per measure we're allowed to have. Remember, again, you can use any combination of notes or rests as long as you don't pass that number that you get when you add up the note value of our meter. Okay? Let's do one more just for good measure. Okay? Let's say we are in, let's change our color back. Let's say we are in 2, 2. Okay? The first thing that we need to do is look over at our chart on the left and figure out what that bottom number means. Now, if you look over at our chart, you can see that a 2 means that we are using a half note. So let's write a half note on the bottom. And then remember, the top number tells us how many of those notes that we have, and that is 2. So if we draw our example measure, we're going to have 2 half notes. Now, how many beats is a half note worth? If you remember from our note value lesson, it's 2 and 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. So the measures that we could write can only have 4 measures. They can't have 3. They can't have 5. They have to have 4. Let's do one more example. Let's do one more example. How about 2, 1? Okay, if you look at our chart, 2, 1 means that we're dealing with a whole note. So on the bottom, I'm going to draw a whole note. The top number tells us how many of those whole notes we have, and the answer is 2. So we can draw an example measure, and we're going to draw 2 whole notes in it. Now, how many beats is a whole note worth? A whole note is worth 4 beats. Now, remember, this chart over here on the left is not showing you its note value, and I know that's confusing, okay? But it is not showing us its note value. This is showing us what it means if you have it on the bottom of your meter, okay? Note value and this chart are not the same thing. I know that's confusing, okay? So, make sure that you don't forget that. But now, we know that the note value of a whole note is 4. We have 2 of them, so 4 plus 4 equals 8. Okay, so the note value that you cannot go over is 8. Okay, so again, if we were to write in some music, we could have 1, 2, 3, 4 half notes. A half note is worth 2 beats. 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 2 is 6, plus 2 is 8. So that works. I could have a whole note and 4 quarter notes. A whole note is 4 beats. 4 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. 4 plus all of that would equal 8. Right? So what I really, really, really need you to take away from this is just that process of figuring out what the meter means, or what that example measure is going to look like, and how many beats you're allowed to use per measure according to the meter. Okay? As always, if you have any questions, please, please, please send me a message. I'm never going to turn anyone away who has a question. Okay? Do your best. Let me know if you need anything. And remember, always, always, always be kind. Okay? Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, guys.